Welcome to Washington in Focus, powered by the Center Square and a production of America's Talking Network. I'm your host, Cole McNeely. You can go check out all of our great podcasts at americastalking.com. Joining me today on this very fine podcast, on this very fine Friday, is Brett Davis. Brett, how are you?
I'm doing all right. How about yourself?
Oh, come on. Yeah, bring a little more energy than that, Brett. Let's try that again. Brett, how are you?
I'm great.
Thank you.
Everything's wonderful.
Thank you. That's what we need.
Did I overcompensate?
Yes, way overcompensate. We've got the man, the myth, the mediocre. It's Spencer Pauley. Spencer, how are you?
That's fair. Oh, not too bad. Dealing with the cold. It's pretty gray outside, a little chilly. Can't complain. Just another day out here in Washington.
Spencer is the punching bag of Washington in Focus when I'm on here, and that's how we like to keep it.
He's the Meg Griffin of the program.
Pretty
For
much.
any Family Guy fans.
Yeah. I will say, on a real note, Spencer's a really nice guy, and he's got a great sense of humor, which is why I like to pick on him a little bit. This is completely off topic. We're going to get to the news of Washington here in a second, but I was thinking about pulling a joke on Spencer, actually, of getting a couples coffee mug, right? Because you can personalize these things and send it to his place out there in Washington with, his name and a different girl than his girlfriend's name on it, and just see how that goes over. I mean, Brett, how do you think that would go over? You've got a little more, seasoned years under your belt than Spencer does. He thought it'd be hysterical to pull that prank on his girlfriend.
I'm curious to see what would happen.
I did. I think that would be hilarious.
Is there do you see any downside to this, Brett?
Not for us. I think we'd find it hilarious.
Not for us. That's the important thing. For Brett and I, this is only
positive for you too.
Yeah, positive for us. Anyway, yes. All right, guys. Let's get to the news. Brett, let's start off with you. We typically do. We think you're like the starter, and Spencer here's the closer.
It's a good nickname for Spencer, the closer.
The closer. Spencer,
Sounds
the closer, Pauley. Man, we should call you that.
Nice.
Good nickname. All right, Spencer, the closer. We're coming to you later. Now, Brett, you've got a story here talking about restrictions on police pursuits, and there's support that is growing to roll back some of those restrictions.
Right. Several stories, actually, and including some written by our editor, Jeremy Lott, who's not with us this morning. So some background. Current police pursuit law in Washington state is basically probable cause instead of reasonable suspicion. It used to be reasonable suspicion, but they've upped it. So it's much more difficult now for police officers to give chase to criminals. That's resulted in some interesting statistics. The Washington State Patrol reports that last year, 3,100 drivers failed to stop when troopers tried to pull them over. So as you can imagine, people are a little bit upset about the impact of this law, and there's legislation working its way through the legislature to restore the reasonable suspicion threshold so that police can more easily pursue criminals. It had a hearing on Tuesday where opponents and supporters, went back and forth on it, including, I think I mentioned this last week about Professor Martina Morris from the University of Washington. She cited a study that said this law has in fact reduced traffic fatalities and police chases, but that study has since come under fire. I think I mentioned last week, a criminologist from Seattle University, Professor Matthew Hickman, had some criticisms of the study, and that has only continued. A man by the name of Bob Scales, he has since charged that Morris's data is flawed, and that statistics from the Washington Traffic Safety Commission, I think I have that right, that organization shows that fewer traffic deaths have occurred than Morris is claiming. The study, she had it posted online, and then our editor wrote a story about how about this criticism from Mr. Scales, and the story mysteriously disappeared from where it was online for about a period of 24 hours. Now, it's my understanding that it's back online again in some amended form. I haven't looked at it yet, but I saw that he had sent out an email saying that this Mr. Scales guy, and apparently, we're going to be Jeremy will be writing a story about that later today. So the drama on police pursuit law here in Washington continues.
Well, yeah. And beyond what you talked about there, we also had a Democratic state rep, Roger Goodman out of Kirkland, actually said that police were politicizing the pursuit law.
The way he framed the police's response to the bill on a TVW program called The Impact was a bit telling. Yes, he said, I'm trying to find the quote here. Yeah, he says, talking about the police's negative response to the law that makes it more difficult for police to chase criminals. He says that is regrettable that some in the police actually politicized needlessly public safety and perhaps even endangered public safety by advertising widely, "We can't chase you," when in fact the existing policies were already in place, were already very restrictive. He's referring to local police departments, some of which have, more restrictive police pursuit laws. So I guess the other side is upset that basically the state is, demanding a one size fits all solution to this problem. And he's saying, let opponents to the current law are saying, local communities should be able to make that decision for themselves. But I thought it was interesting the way he framed it, blaming the police, saying the police were politicizing it because, some of them are criticizing a law that's making it, honestly, more difficult for them to do their jobs. I just seemed like a PR misfire to me, in my opinion.
Now, Brett, where does this go from here? I mean, what's the next steps? Obviously, there's a lot of controversy around it. Where is it going from here?
Right. It's had a public hearing. It'd probably go into executive session next, and they'll vote on whether the committee will vote on whether or not to recommend it, pass or not pass. I'm guessing it'll pass out of the House. The big question is what will happen in the Senate, where a companion bill is being held up by Senator Amaka Dhingra. She's been relying on the UW study that we talked about earlier to make her case that she's not so sure this law should be changed. She's in support of another law that will basically study the issue and make some recommendations by October of 2024.
So it sounds
like it looks like it might make its way through the House, but the Senate is the real roadblock. So if she doesn't change her mind, or if the members of her committee don't get her to change her mind somehow, it looks like it won't pass. But that's just speculation on my part at this point.
There's a lot going on here. Is there anything else going on around this story that would be relevant for our readers and listeners in the Washington state to really grasp all the issue here, if that makes sense?
It seems like pressure is building to do something about the current law. I mean, it's not just police officers that are speaking out against the law. At the public hearing I mentioned earlier that happened on Tuesday, we had, several mayors and other law enforcement representatives speaking out against the bill. So a lot of people are not happy with this bill and what's happened since, in terms of, the number of people just simply not stopping for the police, increase in vehicle thefts and the like. Pressure is mounting, and we'll see see what impact that has on Senator Dhingra.
All righty. Well, we, as is the case with all of Brett Davis's stories, we will stay up to date with that one. Brett, I do have one. We didn't discuss this beforehand.
Surprise question.
Surprise question is coming. Well, to be fair, peel back the curtain. All of the questions are surprise questions, but the topics are not. Surprise question and topic. Has there been any movement on the capital gains tax in the court?
No, we don't. No, not yet.
Okay, no update on that. This is
no update on that.
Brett,
it could be several months.
All I know, I'm fully invested in this story. This is,
but you're right to ask.
Well, I have heard about this thing for 3 months, and I am intrigued, and I want to see where this thing lands.
We all want to see where this thing lands.
You gotta be patient, Cole. It takes time.
Not my strong suit, Spencer. Speaking of which, Spencer Pauley, now that you hopped into the conversation and rudely interrupted the esteemed Brett Davis.
Apologies, Brett. Apologies.
No worries.
Spencer, now that you hopped in here, let's stick with you. There's some controversy in Pierce County with some potential airport sites, and there's some tribes that are having concerns about where they're planning on having these.
It seems like all of Pierce County really doesn't like this, but basically the Washington Department of Transportation is looking for a new site to build a new airport, because the Seattle airport is going to reach max capacity by 2050. I mean, that's a long way from now, but they're planning now. So basically, they've dwindled down their preferred spots to 3 locations, including 2 in Pierce County. Now, when that happened in October last year, Pierce County Council already sent a letter to them saying, this is a terrible idea. Well, earlier this week, they doubled down saying, hey, really don't do that, okay? And they listed reasons why, basically saying that's a rural area. A lot of their agriculture comes in these areas. And so with that being said, you're going to see, air pollution, water quality go down, they're saying. And it just affects a lot of the farmers out there who would have to move because of this. Now, with the tribes, though, there's the Nisqually and Puyallup tribes out there in Pierce County. And they also sent letters out to the transportation department saying, this affects the salmon out there that they incubate out there. That's a big part of their diet, they said. And that's also where they do a lot of their ceremonial hunting. And so they're saying, please don't build over here, because along with polluting the air and affecting the air quality, you're affecting our way of life. So,
and Spencer, kind of beyond those aspects, there's also an angle here of saying the rural community is taking issue with the fact that this airport is being built to support urban communities in a rural area.
Mm-hmm. And so basically, they sent a resolution to the Department of Transportation recommending that they just extend the preferred location and find somewhere else. The commission that the Department of Transportation hired for this whole thing, they're supposed to narrow down to one site by June of this year, but we'll see, just because of all of this going on, a lot of pushback from the community.
Now, has the Washington State Department of Transportation responded in any way?
They will not respond to me about this.
All right.
We'll see what happens, but I'll keep asking and saying, hey, seems like a lot of people don't like this. What is your opinion on this?
Should we maybe have Brett try? Just a different name, maybe upset somebody over there, Spencer.
Maybe I did. Yeah. Brett, you want to try?
Maybe instead of having certain politicians not answer me, I can try a whole new class of people who won't respond to me.
Yeah, you guys can flip flop on the people you don't get responses from. See if you can
It'll
get
be
a
a de facto
comment.
Experiment.
Spencer, you've got another one. This one in King County. The homeless authority there has a 5-year plan estimated to cost nearly $12 billion. That's with a B. What's going on there, Spencer?
Well, the King County Regional Homelessness Authority's 5-year draft plan, their solution is housing. So they want to build more permanent housing for folks who are experiencing homelessness within the county. And to do that, it's basically going to cost $8.4 billion in capital to build these buildings. Also, operating costs, they're saying, would be between $1.7 to $3.4 billion over the 5 years. So basically, they're saying we need a lot more money than we're getting right now, which is $253 million a year. So you tell me. But basically, what we're seeing in the county is not a lot of progress being made. The point in time count that they made this year, counting the number of homeless people within, is at 13,368. That's about almost 2,000 more than it was in 2020. So, if you're doing down to numbers, like this 5-year plan costs about $882,000 per homeless person. They're spending.
Wow.
So
yeah, that is quite. When you break it down that way, when we talk about the Center Square reporting from the taxpayer's perspective and focusing on taxpayer issues, this is the kind of conversation we're talking about, which is you break it down per homeless individual, and you're looking at 800,000. Is that what you said?
882,000.
882,000 over the course of 5 years.
Yep.
That is the taxpayer side we're talking about. When you look, there are other entities out there, and this is not to go off on a journalism rant, but when you look at other entities, and we talk about framing of stories, you can look at how you frame a story in different ways. And there would be entities that would frame that story purely as a government action and the impact of that government action, and not look at the fact that there is an $880,000 price tag attached to each head that it's helping out. And that's why the sort of reporting that the Center Square does, it's fair, it's just, all those things. But this is a side of these kind of government programs and actions that are taken that are not looked at. So this plan they have, this is a plan at the moment, correct, Spencer?
Yeah, and they have to have public feedback on it. So this is not set in motion, nor are they potentially getting the funds, because this would be a collection of funds from the county, the city of Seattle, nonprofit organizations that will, help out for the authority, who basically just runs the entire homeless outreach programs throughout the county.
And do we know this is a 5-year plan, but is this a plan that's going to help in the next 5 years, or is this a 5-year plan to help solve what I'm going to generally call the homelessness crisis in perpetuity, if that makes sense, Spencer? Are they looking at this and approaching this as, hey, this is 5 years to solve it for the next 50 if we can? Or is this a Band-Aid basically on this solution for this problem rather, for the next 5 years?
It seems like they want to make a really big dent on homelessness, and it's a very ambitious 5-year plan. just based on what they say for housing. They say, I believe they would need to build 23,000 units of living. And I think it's integrated into the $11.8 billion price tag is how much that would cost to do so. So, I think they believe that they will get that much money? I'm not sure. But I think they just have a price tag of how much it would cost to see an actual improvement with the homelessness problem within the county.
All righty. Well, we'll keep update with that story, Spencer. Spencer, we're going to look at one more from you here.
Sure.
It's you got a story out of in the Seattle area, REI. They had layoffs, the REI co-op. Seattle area continuing to see businesses lay off workers. This is not the only one, but this is one of the more recent ones.
The Seattle area right now is seeing a lot of layoffs. I've talked about Amazon and Microsoft last month announcing they're laying off 3,000 people within their headquarters, and REI is, I think, 160 some. They announced yesterday. And with that being said, they're just these companies are taking losses and they're trying to just resituate their companies so that they profit. And REI was doing that, saying we are trying to get profitability back. Interesting enough, I saw today that REI is now seeing issues with potential unions. I saw out of Ohio that some REI businesses are closing because saying there's a staff shortage, and it's because they're essentially on strike saying we are not working if you're going to ban a union. So it seems like REI is dealing with a lot right now nationwide. But as for the Seattle area, their headquarters throughout the region are resituating their headquarters a bit and getting rid of some key employees, I suppose.
Yeah, I don't know if this is the case with REI, but I know with a lot of tech companies, they traditionally run in the red. They traditionally run and operate heavily off of loaned money. And so, I think people kind of look at, they see a lot of tech companies in particular laying employees off. Well, it's because their operating costs don't really come from revenue. A lot of their operating costs come from loaning dollars. And when we have interest rates jumping up, that's why you kind of start to see these things. And so there's this, I think people see the layoffs and, it could be an indication of people preparing for a economic, downturn or weakening here in 2023. But specifically on the tech companies and on the western part of the United States, they run in the red. They operate based off of money they don't have in hand. And so when an impact to the economy, such as rising interest rates, comes in, well, it's going to hit them first before it hits anybody else because they need that money to keep their operating cost up. And so, when we talk about interest rates rising, things like that, I always think that these layoffs on these tech companies are just a really simple way to see how interest rates going up directly impact certain industries. Spencer, an interesting story I saw you put together.
Our times in Seattle.
Always.
Our closer came in with the off speed there. Spencer, the closer, Pauley.
So the nickname is sticking. Nice.
I think it's a good one. I actually think that's the first time I haven't come up with a nickname that is disparaging for Spencer. I think
so. Well done, Cole.
We'll take it.
Yeah, we'll take it. It's a low bar, but I think that one passed it. So, well, speaking of closing, that's all the time we have this week on Washington in Focus. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this, subscribe, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get this podcast. If you want to support this podcast and podcasts like this, there's a link in the description. You can make a donation, help us keep this thing going. For Cole McNeely, Brett Davis, and Spencer Pauley, you've been listening to the Washington in Focus podcast, and we will be back next week.